And this is the progression that Southside uses on all of his melodies, and this is why it sounds so good. And this is his formula once it comes to 808s. And this is his formula once it comes to 808 rolls. And this is his formula once it comes to hi-hats. What's up guys, I'm QSS and today I'll be showing you how you can make beats just like Southside. I will be breaking this tutorial down into melodies and drums. And for the melodies I will be talking about his go-to presets, bangs and plugins, his go-to progression, and the mixing that he always uses on all of his melodies. And for the drums I will be showing you where you can find the sounds that he uses on all of his beats, his formula to open hats, his formula to 808s, his formula to 808 rolls, and his formula to hi-hats. And without further ado, let's get into this tutorial. So now for where you can find the exact sounds that Southside uses on every single beat that he makes. So for that I will be leaving down there on the description the link to 2 drum kits that were made by a Reddit user called Lunch77, and they are completely free and they are very complete. And make sure you guys go cop both. They were the best drum kits that I could find on the internet about Southside, and that's pretty much it for his sound selection. So now for his formula once it comes to his open hats. But before we get into it, I will be talking a little bit about his claps and his snares. So he tends to use it a lot, the Luger's lap clap, and just layer your snare with the clap and just add more bounce and variation with the snare that he layered with the clap. And he tends to do that using those 2 positions here. So most producers already know this and are already doing this, but once it comes to the open hats, he does something that is very unusual. You will see Southside using only those 2 positions, either on the first hit or on the second hit, or even both, but you will never see Southside using places like this, or even the first hit that is very common, but he tends to always use only those 2 positions. And right now I'll be showing you some examples of when Southside does this. So this is the first example. So he layers a clap with a snare and then added more bounce and more variation using those 2 positions with the snare that he layered with the clap. And this is the second example. So he layers the clap, I think it is a clap. Yeah, he layered a clap with a snare or another clap so it could sound fuller, and then added more bounce to his beats using the ring shot on those 2 positions again, and added a open hat on this position here. And by the way, those beats that I'm playing are from the Freaky, the best beats of 2020 by Southside. And if you guys didn't watch that video, I'll be putting on the cards right here. And now for the third example. He did almost the same thing as the second example, but he just added this place here so he could add more bounce and more variation, and he layered the clap again and added the open hat on the same place. And now for the last example. So what he did this with these snares is very unusual thing to do. You will see a lot of Wheezy doing this, but Southside tends to not do this a lot. But once it comes to the open hats, you can see that he used those 2 positions that I'm talking about. And that's pretty much it for the examples. And now for his formula once it comes to his 808s. So now for his formula once it comes to his 808s. So those are the exact places that Southside often puts his 808s. And just like the Pyrex video, every single pattern that he does is a variation of this pattern here. And as you can see, even the second one that I put that is very common for you to see Southside using is a little bit of a variation from this. You just change the third hit, and now I have 15 examples or 16 examples, and I will be showing you guys some of them where you can see clearly the variation of this pattern happening. So on the first example, you can see that Southside used this first pattern but didn't use the third hit, and added some more hits onto the second pattern and onto the first hit of this pattern. On this second example, he used the first pattern perfectly. On this pattern, he just changed a little bit of the 4th hit and added another hit onto here. And on the 4th one, instead of using this pattern, he chose to use this one here. So once you are making Southside type beats, make sure you copy the pattern that I showed but change a little bit of the hits, add more rows, take out some hits, and just create your own pattern on every single beat that you make. And that's pretty much it for his 808s. And now for his formula once it comes to his rows. So the rows that Southside often does are way different than Pyrex and the rows that Pyrex does, because Pyrex tends to use and to add rows every 8 bars, while Southside tends to use rows every 2 bars so he can make his patterns more interesting and not too boring to the listener. And now I will be showing you a perfect example of this happening on the FreeQ video, and let me just open the FLP and play you the example. So this is a very good example, and you can hear that if he kept doing like this pattern again and again and again, it will sound very boring. And this is when he added a bunch of rows and even only hits at the end of 2 bars. So let me just stretch this like this so you can see the bars and the timestamps behind it. So every 2 bars he adds something new, as you can see. And his favorite rows, once it comes to adding his rows to his 808s, now that you know the positions that he often puts them, would be most of the rows on the 3rd and the 1/3 step. So this row that he did is a triplet, and he tends to use this a lot, just like Pyrex on the end of the pattern. And this row here, which is a row that got 6 hits onto it, that you can only do with the 1/3 or the 1/6. And that's pretty much it once it comes to his rows. Make sure you add rows from the 1/3 or even only hits at the end of the pattern so you can make your patterns more interesting. And make sure you add them every 2 bars once you feel like your pattern is getting too repetitive, just like Southside did on this example here. So now for his formula once it comes to his hi-hats. So out of 10 beats that you may study from Southside, you will see that at least on 7 of them Southside would use the second hit as a place to put his rows, and he does that consistently on most of his patterns. You can see that happening here, 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 and that's it. And Southside tends to do this a lot because it serves as a foundation for the next ideas that he may have for his patterns. It is way easier for you to visualize the whole pattern once you know how to start your pattern. It's just like writing an essay. Most people already know how to write an essay on what they should talk about, but they don't know how to start. But once they do, all of the ideas come naturally. And this is exactly what Southside does, using the second hit of his patterns to add rows. And now for his favorite grid. So one thing that Southside never does is he would never switch between different type of grids once he is making just one hi-hat pattern. He would always stick to one. And out of 10 beats that you will see that Southside makes, you will see that Southside uses on 10 of them the 1/3 step grid, because this is where his most used row is. And his most used row would be the shortest row out of the 1/3 that you just press Shift D and you are on the most used row by Southside. You can see him doing and using this row here on this pattern, 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 on this pattern. On all of the patterns that Southside does, you will see him always using the shortest row out of the 1/3. And now I'll be showing you a beat that he got placed that is a very good example of his hi-hat patterns. So this is how the beat sounds like. And every single row that he did is the shortest row of the 1/3. He chose to use the second hit right here. On here, you can see him using again. And literally on every single row that he made on this pattern and that he makes on most of his patterns, he would use the shortest row out of the 1/3. So if you're trying to make a Southside type beat or a beat just like him, make sure you use the shortest row of the 1/3 on most of the rows that you make, so you can make your pattern sound just like his. And that's pretty much it for his formula once it comes to his hi-hats. So let's start with his go-to presets, banks, and plugins. So for you to find the exact sounds that Southside uses on all of his melodies, I will be showing on the screen his go-to plugins, banks, and presets. And with that being said, make sure you guys go copy the DRZA banks and the bass guitar banks, and make sure you guys scroll through the default banks listed on Nexus, Electrax, and Omnisphere, because you can find very good sounds on there too. And that's pretty much it for his sound selections when it comes to melodies. So now for the progression that Southside uses on all of his melodies. So this is how the progression looks like, and this is how it sounds like. So you can easily make this progression just choosing a bass note here. For this melody it is C. So just choose one, skip 4 notes, put one note here, and again another note but just one semitone from F, and then another here, and one here. And this progression works so well on a Southside Type B because it is very tense and because it is very catchy. And it is very tense because it got notes playing that are very close together, just one semitone from each other for most of the melody. And this is very catchy because it is repetitive but not so boring. But if you intend to play this again and again and again, make sure you add something onto the second half of this so this won't sound too predictable. So once you're going to change the second half of this, just make sure you add some notes that are already on the progression like this, or just put the whole progression 1 octave up, or just some notes 1 octave up or 1 octave down, and that will make the second half way more interesting and this whole progression way more interesting. And this progression works well with bad sounds, but it works with more harsh sounds too, like ARP. So I got this ARP from Bass Guitar, and the melody will sound like this. But the one tip is for you, once you are using those harsh sounds, for you to add something as a texture behind it so you can make this melody sound way fuller. So a very good example of this would be this ARP, but with this patch playing like 1 octave down. It will sound like this. And one last tip is for you, once you're making those textures, for you to not change the progression but stretch this like stretch the whole progression out and pitch it down if you're trying to make textures. But once you're trying to make more main melodies, just pitch it up. Like C7 is very good, but stretch the whole pattern in, and this makes the main melody stand out more from the textures that you may add, and it will sound very good. And that's pretty much it for the progression that Southside uses on all of his melodies. So now for the mixing that Southside uses on all of his melodies. So after you have your melody right here, just put it onto the mixer, add EQs and reverbs. So the EQs is very important so you can cut the lows and make sure that there aren't any frequencies that are going to clash with the 808s. But as you are going to add like the main melodies on C7, you will see that there aren't really any frequencies on here, like they are below 200 hertz. Like there are a little bit, but just make sure you are making and adding this onto layers that are placed on lower octaves. And now for the reverb. So as you're going to add a lot of layers and textures, you need to make sure that every reverb that you add on every sound that you have has the same size, high cut and low cut. So every single sound and the sounds that you have can sound like as if they are playing on the same room, and they will sound very glued together. And that's pretty much it for that. And now for his go-to presets on halftime, Grossbeat, and on Effectrix. So his go-to presets on halftime would be 1 bar, half, and 1/16. And changing the modes, the mix, and the bends is very important so you can create different melodies using the same progression again and again and again. And that's pretty much it for the halftime. And now for the gross beat. So his go-to presets on gross beat would be half speed, slow triplet, that sounds like this. And this preset here that you can make only with the slow triplet. And that's pretty much it for the gross beat. And now for his go-to presets on Effectrix. So just let me grab Effectrix here, and his go-to presets would be this one right here that you just add the loop. And this is a very old Southside thing to do, but it works too. And the other presets would be the backwards vocals and the pause and repeat from Factory 5. Let me just find it right here. So that's pretty much it for the mixing that he always uses on all of his melodies and his go-to presets on gross beat, Effectrix, and halftime. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you could learn something from this tutorial, and if you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and leave down in the comments some ideas for next videos. And make sure you guys give me feedback so I can constantly improve on my tutorials, being them good or bad. I appreciate every single feedback that you guys give me. And if you didn't really understand something that I said, make sure you just go onto my DMs on my Instagram and just ask me there. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching again, and I see you on the next tutorial.